economic transformation has always been at the center of Africa's development agenda, but the progress is still slow because most countries are working in isolation. This is according to the latest report from the African Center for Economic Transformation. So how can the AfCFTA foster economic transformation on the continent? We spoke to the Senior Director of Research and Policy Engagements, Edward Brown, for more.
Africa's economic transformation journey has been a difficult one, even before the pandemic. And I mean, our recent report, that is Integrating to Transform, makes the point that over the last 2 decades, that Africa's economies have, although they've been growing, many of them have grown more than 5%, they have not been transforming. They're transforming slowly. And in our recent analysis, update of our transformation index, I'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes, shows that over the last decade, between 2011 and 2019, before the pandemic, most African economies have almost invariably stalled in terms of their transformation trajectory. And this is worrying. And this is what has led us also to come up with this report talking about integrating to transform. Now, if I should give just a brief overview of what we mean by economic transformation, because I think there are varieties of interpretation of what economic transformation is. We believe that economic transformation goes beyond growth, and that growth alone is not going to sustain African economies and diversify the economies and raise income. And therefore, when we say growth with depth, the depth, each of the letters mean an indicator. It means, in other words, D means diversification of production and export structures. E refers to export competitiveness. P refers to the productivity increases in agriculture, in firms, manufacturing, and governments. And then T implies technological upgrading throughout the economy. And all these variables together, these outcome indicators together, would influence human well-being. So that's why we say growth with depth. So a very simple measure which allows any policymaker to identify what are the drivers of transformation, and therefore hold their management to task on driving those issues in terms of transformation. Now, when we look at the data, the recent data, as I said, it shows that economies have not been transforming. In fact, they've stalled before COVID. And now the pandemic is also going to further exacerbate the situation. But I think the good news, the recent analysis by the World Bank and the IMF suggests that some economies are going to have a stronger recovery path. But we also point to the fact that in spite of this strong recovery path, countries must start collaborating because they have not been collaborating enough to derive the skills that are required to get these economies to scale. And that is the thrust of the latest report, which is integrating to transform, with basically saying that we want, Africans to take advantage of the regional opportunities that are out there to harness heightened collaboration and improve the economies.
Edward, just to that point, heightened collaborations, improve economies, but what does collaboration really look like here when we're talking about different African countries coming together? What is required for that to be attained?
First of all, talk a little bit about, the type of, collaboration that we're talking about. And then I can give example of what collaboration looks like. So that at least we're on the same page on this issue. Now, to begin with, we all know that African regional integration and cooperation has been long on the agenda in Africa for a long time, and that many governments have been trying, and the AU has been playing a critical role in this area. But we also know that the regional integration frameworks, have not been, the implementation have been slower than planned, and therefore it makes it difficult for African countries to come together because the frameworks have been, the way they've been defined has not allowed the countries to really domesticate some of these policies, ensure that but some of the key areas that we're talking about, the key elements of trade, which is the negotiations of the tariff and non-tariff barriers or integration of markets, to talk about regional public goods. and that regional public goods implies that we are looking at those types of goods that bring countries together interdependency to foster social, economic, and political cohesion that would allow these economies to grow stronger. Those are the key drivers of economic transformation that we are advocating for. Now, the examples are, for example, talking about, the transport corridors. If you're talking about intra-regional trade, one of the key drivers would be that you need to have smooth, effortless movement of labor, goods, and services across national boundaries. It means you need to look at the regulations, beyond that also the infrastructure. Another is looking at how you manage riparian issues. It's not just an issue that concerns two countries. For example, if you're looking at the Nile River Basin issue, it's not just between Egypt and Ethiopia. Uganda is involved, Rwanda, all these that supply to the river, the Nile River, have to be part of the riparian issue. So the subsidiarity of these countries together to look at how you collaborate to ensure that it's a win-win situation is very critical. And this is also going to improve trade. So you need that kind of collaboration to, have, what is it called, the regional integration occur in a much more, a win-win situation for most countries. Now, examples of what does it look like? If you take, for example, the African medical facility, which was set up in response to the COVID epidemic, this provided a significant opportunity for the countries to have certified, valid, supply of PPEs. And now they're also doing the same thing with the whole issue of vaccines. Another example we could look at is the one area network in East Africa, where countries like Kenya, Sudan, Southern Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, and recently Tanzania in January joined, have reduced significantly the cost of roaming. And this certainly would facilitate trade tremendously. So that kind of collaboration where the countries come together to look at common issues that they share common problems and thinking regionally, but acting local and seeing how you can look at your local policies and rules and regulations to align them better in order to ensure that we all enjoy the use and benefits of collaboration.
Yeah, now speaking of collaboration as well as the AfCFTA, we know that it is meant to foster regional integration and increase intra-African trade. But is this happening? And is it happening at the pace that it is actually supposed to be at?
Well, it is happening. It's beginning to happen, but we are a long way from that, very long way from it. And in fact, this issue of trade integration, intra-African trade has been on the front burner for quite some time. So there is a need to domesticate these policies. And this requires, it all comes to incentives. It comes to the nature of the incentives and whether countries see the benefits of coming together and the downside risk are mitigated. So there is a need to look much more strategically as to the nature of the particular activity that you're doing. So for example, in terms of the AfCFTA, they have really advanced on the issues of tariffs and non-tariff. In particular, the non-tariff barriers are going to be the challenge. And it will take time, even for the tariff, reduction of tariff to zero for almost 90% of the products. It will take quite some time. It's estimated between 5 and 10 years. It will vary from country to country because they need to domesticate this issue. They need to understand what it means in terms of their fiscal regime and how is it going to affect their revenue level and what support they're going to get through the AfCFTA to mitigate this downside in the short term. And over the long term, of course, the benefits will begin to accrue. So it will take some time to do that. But at the same time, what we're saying in this report is that beyond looking at these tariffs and non-tariff barriers, you need to begin to look at those regional public goods that are fundamental to driving the trade. In other words, focus on the tariffs and non-tariff barrier issues, which the AfCFTA is getting significantly, and the political momentum is there. But you also need to bring, not necessarily move the spotlight completely, but shift the emphasis also, putting the spotlight on how you really deal with the issues that are common problems. The regional public goods needs to be looked at a lot more carefully. I mean, the whole issue, I mentioned the transport corridors, but the whole issue of climate risk. Climate doesn't respect any boundaries. And if any country thinks that alone they can address their climate problems, they are not going to succeed. It requires collaboration in order to do that. It requires regimes that are harmonized to ensure that these issues can be better dealt with at the regional level, because that's how the climate issues can be addressed. Global pandemics, when the COVID-19 occurred, of course, most countries shut their borders, But generally, what you need to do is to coordinate across countries to ensure that, the benefits of the programs or the recovery program, or the benefits of mitigating the risk of COVID are together addressed. So the whole issue of regional collaboration becomes very, very important.
Also, something that is crucial and very, very important is digital innovation. And we are in the digital era. This is something that we should always factor in everything that we are doing. Just what are the priorities, areas for action? And are we seeing it getting the needed attention, whether it is investing in the right infrastructure that is needed, whether it's also integrating the innovation ecosystem, formulating strategies? Are we giving it the attention needed?
I think this is clearly a very, very important area. And if we do not become proactively involved in understanding the dynamics of this at the state level and at the private sector level, the digital revolution and digital innovations are going to surpass us, and we will be left behind. So I think it's a very critical, and this is where regional collaboration comes in, because many countries are small, their capabilities are limited and all that. So it is only through collaboration that they can ensure that you can, for example, the one area network I mentioned earlier, it's how they have been able to reduce roaming charges. But beyond that are the issues of technology, capabilities, and so on, which individual countries cannot on themselves be able to become competitive. So they need to collaborate with others. And that is why the African Digital Infrastructure Strategy, which the AU is implemented, becomes very critical. It serves as an anchor to deal with this. And also, when you're talking about the digital infrastructure, these are quite expensive propositions where the states need to come together to see how they can mobilize resources to support putting fiber optics and all kinds of, for 4G and 5G and so on, which are critical for these countries. And therefore, the need for, again, it comes back to the report, emphasizing the need for collaboration, the need to identify what is the nature of the goods. For example, we're talking about digital technology. We need to understand the nature of digital technology, what is the technical elements of it, and how can these build the capacities at the local level to be able to take advantage of them. And many countries don't have the capacity, but when they come together, they can collectively build capacities to help each other to basically continue to address the digital technology challenge. That is a tremendous opportunity, has a downside risk in terms of employment. So we also need to see how we retool our labor force in order for the labor force to be future ready, to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that digital technology is offering.